Welcome to the Leadership with Biana Kovic Show, and thank you for being with us. Our topic, leadership, focuses on leaders such as yourselves. We believe that leadership is a skill that can be learned through practice and awareness. It is our hope that our conversation will help you become more reflective when it comes to your own leadership practices and enable you to leave a positive legacy. Our very special guest tonight is Megha Hamal. Megha is the founder and CEO of Megha Hamal PR and Branding LLC, a Chicago-based boutique firm that works in a wide range of categories, including lifestyle, restaurants, healthcare, and technology. Megha is passionate about storytelling, helping brands reach their full potential and increase their brand influence. Megha is also a published writer, and her brand has been featured in national and local media outlets like Entrepreneur Magazine, Voyage Chicago Magazine, CEO Blog Nation, and many more. Megha, good evening and welcome to the show.
Thank you, Biana. It's a pleasure.
Megha, you are CEO and the founder of Megha Hamal PR and Branding. Can you tell us a little bit more about your company?
Sure. So Megha Hamal PR and Branding, it's a Chicago-based boutique PR firm that works in a wide range of categories, including lifestyle, restaurants, healthcare, and technology.
As you mentioned, some of your clients are from a lifestyle industry, technology. Can you tell us a little bit more? How do you go about attracting your clients, and how do you develop a personal plan for each client?
Sure. Each client is different, because of the sectors that they represent. A lot of my work earlier involved going to different networking events, also getting, referrals from my friends that are in the industry, especially, for brands and clients that are looking for services when it comes to publicity or reputation management, brand development, messaging, thought leadership, social media, and how do I go about establishing a relationship with them where I can start working? Basically, it's a lot of it is just kind of telling the clients or the prospects about the value that I bring as a PR and branding expert. I have tons of cross-sector experience. I've worked in government, I've worked in quasi-government, and then I've also worked in private sector. So when I approach my prospects, I mention them about my cross-sector experience, and I tell them about my background in PR. My education was actually in PR and advertising. So coupled with that, I mentioned kind of the value that I bring to the table. And after a few conversations, sometimes they take some time to build that relationship. And after they feel like you are a credible and a trusted advisor to them and to the brand, they end up actually working as my client.
So you mentioned that you do publicity and reputation management. Can you tell us what reputation management is?
Sure. Publicity or PR and reputation management, they all kind of go hand in hand. A lot of the services are basically proactive. So crisis management is more reactive, but publicity and PR and reputation management is more proactive. And that basically takes form of different things. Like, for example, I work on developing press releases for my clients, PR strategies if the client is working on a product launch or a new product launch. Basically, I work with them on developing the press release, or if there is a company announcement, there is somebody joining the company as a executive, then I work on that announcement as well. And sometimes these publicity or PR efforts also involve media relations, where I train executives and spokespeople on kind of, what to say, what not to say with the press, because a part of that is reputation management and building as well. So, and based on those things, I basically work with the client on finding an angle or a strategy that works best for them to get them positive coverage. And a lot of it is basically really looking for the right opportunity for collaboration with the media, because not everything is news and not everything can be news. So you have to look for that right opportunity, the right hook and then basically pitch the media. And then if media is interested, then they will end up covering the story or interviewing the executive. So a lot of that is publicity and reputation management.
Interesting. You mentioned that not everything is a news and not everything should be in the news. Can you expand a little bit on it?
Sure. Like I mentioned, not everything can be news, right? If they were, then, everyone would be in the media or getting a press coverage. Especially today, I think you have to be kind of aware of what's happening in the news, look for that angle, like I mentioned, that hook, what makes a story relevant. Media is always looking for stories that have unique angles or something that's very relevant. For example, on the whole China and U.S. trade war, if you know an executive, if you have a client who's a Chinese businessman that has worked in the U.S., he serves as a great subject matter expert to opine on that topic. And that could potentially end up becoming a piece of information that media may be interested in. And when the right time comes, they will interview the subject matter expert. So you have to look for the relevance. You have to look for the timeliness. You have to look for a specific angle and always have a unique story to tell. If you have a unique story on what makes your brand different from the rest of the brand, and if you are a subject matter expert or a thought leader, then you can appear in the media. But that takes a lot of time, preparation, and planning.
So what I'm hearing is that you are looking for that connection between relevance and connection between your client's expertise in hope that it will bring media to the client so that he or she can showcase their expertise.
Absolutely. You got to have a compelling narrative to win media's attention. The challenge with media coverage isn't so much securing the coverage or influencing the perspective of content or placement. The challenge is kind of packaging that message so that it is helpful to the journalist. At the end of the day, you can't just look at it as like, what can I get out of the press? You should also look at it like, well, how can I help the journalist tell the story if you have a story? So if your story is authentic, unique, and relevant, it will end up in the press eventually.
So part of your expertise is storytelling. Can you tell us why is the storytelling so important when it comes to PR and defining a brand?
Storytelling is an effective tool to get a brand story out, and it is such an important tool for any business because it is important for a business owner to give his or her brand a human persona and share the brand story. So it is so important to have that element down because to be compelling, a brand story should have legs. It should include the evolution of the company, the struggles along the way. And the ultimate goal in storytelling is to connect with the audience in an emotional manner and in an authentic manner. So that's why storytelling is so important because it basically humanizes a brand.
So I spoke to a lot of other experts who talked a lot about the connection between branding and reinvention. What are your thoughts on that?
Sure. Let me talk a little bit about the branding aspect, and then I will talk about the reinvention and how that is important or, the impact it has on a brand. So gone are the days, right, when the only important brands were Nike, Coke, and McDonald's. I mean, now we, live in the era of Google, Yelp, and Instagram, where we have access to brands, instantaneously. And we live in an era where brands can no longer exist in a vacuum. So therefore, branding comes into play because branding is the foundation of your brand. Whether it's a personal brand or a company, it gives you a competitive edge and it helps you reach your target customers. And how does reinvention impact one's brand? Or, people talk a lot about reinvention and what does that really mean? I think brands go through reinvention, or I call it transformation for reasons. Sometimes you have to stay relevant and competitive in the marketplace. And that's where, the need of reinvention comes in. I always tell brands that don't pigeonhole yourself because that can have adverse impact to the brand over a long period of time. Reinvention sometimes, is a need, and it has to be done, especially when brands are coming out of a crisis, right? You want to reinvent yourself. And again, reinventing, if done accurately, Biana, it can have a huge positive impact on a brand. However, while you're reinventing, there are a couple of things you want to keep in mind. I always, again, tell brands one of the important things is always tell your story. Even while you're reinventing, remind your audience about why you existed in the first place. Don't forget about your core values. Just because you're reinventing does not mean you have to change your core values. Your audience could evolve and change over a period of time, but your story and core values shouldn't. Because your story and core values at the end of the day are your foundation of your brand. So they shouldn't change. And if you keep those things intact, I think reinvention can have a huge impact and a positive impact on a brand.
I think you're bringing up a very good point about don't change your story and keep your core values in place. For some of us that might not still be sure about our core values, how do you go about advising people what those core values should be for one company?
Again, when I speak of core values, there are certain core values that every individual has at the end of the day. These are the values that give you a sense of direction. And your core values should not be that far off from your company's values or your brand values. At the end of the day, if you are the CEO or the leader or the executive running your company or the founder of your company, your core values should provide you a sense of direction for your business. For me, authenticity and, giving back have always kind of been my core values growing up, seeing my father, seeing my mother work. Those are the kind of things that they raised me on. And when I started my company, I wanted authenticity and giving back to be my core values for my company. Because at the end of the day, if I'm leading my company, my personal core values should not be different from my company core values. They should basically give me a sense of direction, my personal core values. They are the anchors at the end of the day for me to do business.
So what you're saying to us, you have to align your personal core values with your company core values.
Absolutely.
And what can people gain by engaging with your company?
I think people gain a couple of things. I think number one, I think they gain the cross-sector experience that I have, which is, I think, so important when working with clients, wide range of categories and sectors. Given my own cross-sector experience, I bring wealth of knowledge and I am able to assess my clients' needs very well, given my knowledge from different sectors. Second, people will get accountability. I get things done. I deliver on results. I focus on results. And while I focus on results, I also give back to my community. And that's really important to me. And then another thing is I'm really open to learning and ways I can improve. I am receptive to feedback because when you're working with clients, there might be times where they want to do things a little bit differently. And I'm very receptive to that. As a subject matter expert in PR and branding, I provide my expertise, but there is a little bit different way we can do things. I'm absolutely open to it. So they definitely get someone who is open to new ideas, someone who's innovative as well.
And someone who is very flexible and approachable about doing things a little bit differently.
Yes, absolutely. And, at the end of the day, I like to treat my clients as, part of my big family, because I believe in long-term relationships and flexibility is key when you're working with clients. You're on their time and you have to always remember that.
And what kind of leader are you? What is your leadership style?
Biana, my leadership style is definitely a combination of assertiveness and empathy. I'm definitely an empathetic leader. I like to get things done. I like to, get things completed. And I'm very clear about deadlines with my employees. I want to make sure that they understand the importance of working on deadlines. PR world is all about deadlines. You have to continuously work on deadlines. I'm very assertive about that because I like to deliver on, my promise to my clients and the results that I bring to the table. But at the same time, I'm very empathetic as a person. I like to always put other people's needs in mind when working with them, and I try to be as considerate as I can. So I'm definitely a combination of both.
Going back to branding, how can one's brand use influencers marketing to promote their business?
Sure. I know this term, influencer marketing, keeps coming up, and a lot of my clients, they ask me the same question. The market is flooded with influencers and so-called micro-influencers. And I think as a brand, one should not overlook this new marketing concept, because I read in a magazine recently that influencer marketing a couple of years from today will be the way to do marketing. And it's such a new concept for people right now. So when a brand, is interested in doing influencer marketing or wants to know more about it, I always suggest companies and brands to really look for the right influencer for their brand. It's really important to do the research. Again, there are so many influencers out there in each sector. So you have to do the research. Make sure that the influencer, is interested in your brand and you're interested in the influencer, right? It cannot be a forced relationship, because then the results will look inauthentic. The synergy should be mutual. The synergy should be beneficial to both people. And again, each influencer is different. And for brands, you have to set aside a little bit of budget for influencer marketing.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't have a big budget, again, don't overlook working with micro-influencers in your sector, especially if you're a new company. Sometimes micro-influencers have huge influence in their communities. So always keep those things in mind when working with an influencer or a micro-influencer for your company.
So my question about influencers is, how do you know that they are legit? How do you know that they're effective? And also that their power is really there? Because some influencers might be buying their numbers, they might be inflating who they really are. How do you evaluate that?
So I think, again, you have to be savvy about social media when engaging your brand with influencers. Again, like I mentioned, there are millions of bloggers out there. There are millions of influencers out there. You just have to basically, when you're partnering with them, you have to really kind of understand what are you trying to get out of, and be authentic and transparent earlier with the influencer or the micro-influencer. Let them know that, based on this relationship that we are establishing, I would like to get this out of this partnership. Be completely transparent about it. And, sometimes that goes a long way. And again, if you're paying your influencer, you should be able to see the results, right? Mm-hmm. So always having those metrics and benchmarks and the KPIs for the influencers, I think is really important, because again, influencers work with many brands every day. So if you don't set the ground early on, or if you don't set the benchmark early on, it might be confusing for influencers, like, how are they measured? So you need to have that conversation, I think, early on.
So just to clarify, you should give influencers numbers that you should be hopefully reaching once your engagement starts, right?
Yes, absolutely. I think it's really important to, measure the work that they do, and you have those numbers kind of ready in advance before you start working. Set the benchmark and set the KPIs, key performance index. I think that's really important to do that.
And another question to that, just to expand that a little bit, what is your advice? Should one work with the influencer for 3 months, a year? What would be an ideal time frame?
I think it really depends on what you're trying to get out of the relationship or the partnership with the influencer. If it's just a campaign, right? I mean, if it's a week-long campaign, then, and depending on the budget, again, the week-long campaign might just involve working with the influencer for a couple of days. Whereas, if you have a long-term vision for your brand and you want the influencer to end up becoming your brand ambassador, then you have to fortify that relationship. It doesn't happen overnight. So it takes time and patience and resources. So it really depends on what your goal is as a brand and what you are trying to get out of. I mean, if it's just a brand mention, then yeah, it's a matter of just one post for that influencer. So you as a brand, you really have to kind of set those parameters and goals early on and then figure out the timeline.
And how do you measure power of an influencer before you start working with them?
I think a lot of it has to do with, doing your homework, right? The same concept, applies to PR professionals when you are working with media, I have to do the research on the reporter. I have to understand, what are some of the stories that they have covered in the past? What is their beat? If I were to pitch a story on mental health, it doesn't make sense for me to reach out to an investigative reporter. You have to understand the beat of a reporter. Same thing with the influencer. You have to understand what they have been talking about, online. Do the research. I mean, Google is such a great tool, right, to do all of that. Make sure they are trusted and authentic influencers or micro-influencers. Once you do your research, I think it will be crystal clear whether you want to work with that influencer or not. Another thing I would recommend is, again, going back to the values, right? Ethos. What is your brand ethos? Would you like to work with an influencer who sees your brand message and who understands it? It makes no sense to invest so much money on an influencer who doesn't see the brand message and who is not passionate about your brand values. If giving back is your brand message and brand values, make sure you work with influencers in your sector that believe in giving back. You got to have similar brand ethos at the end of the day when you're looking for influencers.
For the ones that want to become an influencer, what is your advice? How can one build him or herself to become an influencer?
Absolutely. In order to be an influencer, it takes time. You have to be patient. You have to understand what your focus is, find your niche, and then kind of build from that. If you want to be an influencer or an expert, in your field, start telling your story. What is your message? And again, what are some of the topics that you're passionate about? You want to get those topics out onto the social media too, and always remain authentic. And authenticity, I think people see through that very easily, and people want to work with you. Don't focus on just getting likes and followers. I think that comes with time, but you have to get the right content out. You have to get the content out that is beneficial to your audience. Mm-hmm. And that's how you kind of build your influence. And that's what you do online. But then offline, just because you're an influencer online does not mean your job is done. Mm-hmm. You have to continue to build your profile offline as well. And what that means is, again, participating at industry events, speaking at industry events, whether it's a panel discussion or just a speaking engagement, making sure you get your brand message out offline as well. And always give back, if there is someone that's looking for help, whether it's mentoring or whatever, just get involved in your community. You can't just simply, wish to be an influencer by not putting the work. You have to put the work online and offline.
Interesting. So I'm going to a little bit move towards another form of your expertise, which is working with thought leaders. Can you tell us a little bit about why thought leaders are so important nowadays?
Sure. Thought leadership is such an important component in PR. And, another service that I actually provide in my company, it basically, means working with a client who's already a leader and successful and making them a subject matter expert in XYZ topic. Mm-hmm. Again, that takes, more than just a clever commercial or an ad, online ad, or a single blog post, right? It is a really long process. You have to develop the right strategies to bring out the best in them, harness their leadership, and execute on those strategies, in the form of writing an op-ed in the newspaper on the topic that they are passionate about or on the topic that they are well-versed in, or speaking at a conference. Again, the same thing, like if you are passionate about mentoring, you want to write an op-ed about it, great, but then also talk about it, offline as well at an event or a conference. So thought leadership, it's a process and, it takes time to build thought leadership. And if somebody is interested in that area, start doing little things. Mm-hmm. For example, LinkedIn has a publishing platform called LinkedIn Pulse. Start getting your stories out on LinkedIn Pulse. Start writing articles about topics that you're passionate about. And again, when you're building a thought leadership, stay engaged in what's happening in your industry. what's happening, what are some of the challenges that are, taking place in the industry, and provide your point of view as a subject matter expert. You cannot be a thought leader in everything. You have to kind of figure out at least 1 to 2 topics that you're really passionate about and keep honing in on those topics. Over a course of time, you will end up seeing your thought leadership increase.
So what you're saying to us, you have to find your niche.
Absolutely. You have to find your niche. And again, for a CEO or an executive, especially if you are working in the energy field, you're already a subject matter expert, because as a CEO, you get that vantage point, to what's happening in your industry. And maybe you want to talk about that. So it doesn't have to be a topic that you have never talked about. It can be a topic that you've been working on for a long time, and just kind of start using those topics as a way to build your influence.
And would you say that thought leaders would naturally transition to become influencers, or that might be or might not be the case?
It may or may not be the case. Like I mentioned, thought leadership takes a long time. It does not happen over a small course of time. It takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of, energy and dedication. And over a period of time, if you have a unique perspective, right? Always, again, when building thought leadership or even as an influencer, you've got to always ask, what is your unique value proposition on XYZ topic? What is it that you're telling that is so different that, people would want to listen to you? And I think that is really important, I think, when developing your thought leadership. And if you have a unique point of view coupled with strong messaging, with great persona, you will end up having a huge influence on your audience over a course of time.
So Megha, I'm going to segue a little bit into your article that you recently published in the Entrepreneur magazine. You are, as I mentioned, a published author. And the article that you wrote talked about the 5 most important questions to ask yourself before becoming an entrepreneur. Can you talk to us a little bit about what inspired you to write the article and about the 5 most important questions that you need to ask yourself?
Yes, I've always enjoyed writing. And as an entrepreneur, I always wanted to continue to write. And again, the Entrepreneur magazine, provides me with daily inspiration. I read Entrepreneur magazine quite a bit. And I really wanted to share my journey with the magazine because, I went through quite a dilemma of leaving my corporate job and starting my own company. I went through a lot of sleepless nights. I'm sure, most of us, have been there. And I really started asking myself some questions. Why I wanted to be an entrepreneur? What was the, reason I wanted to be an entrepreneur? What is it that I want to leave behind? And after really asking these questions, my decision became a lot clearer and easier. And I really wanted to share that experience with the Entrepreneur magazine so that, it may end up becoming a helpful resource for somebody else out there who's going through a similar phase.
So I think you're bringing up a really good point here, because a lot of us might want to start a business, but we do not get that. We might not get the support from our families or communities. What is your advice on that? How does one overcome that level of fear to actually embark on something that is truly meaningful to one?
I think it's really, again, important to really ask yourself, what is the objective? Why do you want to be an entrepreneur? Some people want to be an entrepreneur because they want to change the world, while some people want to be an entrepreneur because they want to leave a legacy, a footprint, or they simply want to do the right thing. I think whatever that reason might be or the objective might be, I think you really have to know the objective and really ask yourself, is that really what I want to do? Because entrepreneurship is also not easy. There are times where I do feel isolated sometimes, it's not, your traditional 9-to-5 job. You're sometimes constantly working around the clock. And you really have to ask yourself, are you going to be comfortable with the idea of being uncomfortable? There will be times where you may even experience failure, but you have to ask yourself again, is that something you will be okay with? Because again, failure is not permanent. It is just temporary. And I think, You have to constantly exercise your muscles to overcome failure. But that is another question that you have to ask yourself. Are you going to be okay with it and learn from it and become stronger?
Mm-hmm.
So these are some of the questions that you really have to ask yourself before taking on the entrepreneurial journey. And again, one question that I did ask myself, do you have a support network? And I'm not saying you cannot be an entrepreneur or you cannot start a company without some sort of support. I mean, I think you can, but I think the road would be a little bit harder. For me, it was really important for me to start this company. I wanted to do something for myself, and my husband was on board. He really gave me the support that I needed at the time, that emotional support that, you can do this. And I think somebody believing in you, I think is really key when you get on this journey, because believe me, you will ask so many questions to yourself and you will, basically sometimes even convince yourself that this is not the right thing. But sometimes, getting that third party validation, I think, is so important.
Mm-hmm. And what I'm hearing is that you have to learn how to deal with uncertainties, because there is a level of uncertainty attached to entrepreneurship.
Yes, every day there are uncertainties. Because if you know that is the right thing for you, you just know it. And you have to be okay with the uncertainty. I really like this one quote that Ariana Huffington actually, used it. It's one of my favorite quotes. Fearlessness, right? It's like a muscle. She said, I know from my own life that the more I exercise it, the more natural it becomes to not let my fears run me. And I think you always have to remember that.
Any other thoughts that you can share with us on entrepreneurship?
If I were to share anything about the entrepreneurial life, I would say it is exciting. It is thought-provoking. I'm learning every day. Even the littlest thing, I'm learning. And just don't give up on your dreams, because I think it will happen and it is going to happen. I think you just have to be consistent, persistent, focused, and keep at it.
So as you know, this show is about leadership, and I was wondering, are there any traits that leader needs to have to be a truly successful leader?
Sure. In my opinion, I think there are two traits of a leader that I admire. And I think these traits are really important to have. And they are authenticity and empathy, I think, are key to becoming a successful leader.
And when you started in your leadership role, did you have any role models or any type of support that kind of helped you along the way?
I came to the U.S. when I was really young, at 19, from Nepal for my higher education. I left my family and friends, and I did not actually, I kind of had to figure it out on my own. And sometimes I had to make mistakes, I mean, I had to make those mistakes. I had to learn from them. Now I have a community of wonderful people that basically help me or want to hear from me, or I want to hear from them. And it's like a little tribe. When you're an entrepreneur, you're kind of a little part of this tribe or a community that help each other out. However, when I was in my, last company, or even before that, or even as a student, in the U.S. studying PR and advertising, I really did not have a mentor. I really looked up to my parents. Other than that, I did not.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned that you came from Nepal. I'm just curious to learn, how did growing up in Nepal prepared you for an entrepreneurial life that you have right now?
So growing up in Nepal, it's really different. It's a country in Asian continent. Food is different. Everything is really different in Nepal. And I think when I first came to the U.S., I was coached by my father that, you will go through struggles, you will go through challenges, and you just have to adapt to these challenges. You have to be, again, comfortable with the idea of being uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. And I think coming to this country at such a young age, leaving everything behind me, really prepared me for this entrepreneurial journey, because there were times when I was a student when everybody would end up going to their parents' house, for Thanksgiving or Christmas. I was always the one kind of in the dorm or like working, because I really did not have a place where I could just go. So I was always kind of uncomfortable. But that really helped me kind of understand life a little bit better, I think. I had to make mistakes. I learned from my challenges. And today as an entrepreneur, I don't want to say it's easier, but I definitely understand it. And I know that the phase of being uncomfortable is temporary. It's not permanent. And I had to constantly tell myself that in school too. This is temporary. You will get a job. You will graduate. You will find a better job. You will have a house. And I think reminding yourself of these things, I think really set me on the right path to be an entrepreneur today.
Thank you very much for sharing that, because my next question is, how do you effectively deal with setbacks or things that are not comfortable? What are your thoughts on that?
I think everyone deals with the phase of being uncomfortable in their own ways. At least if I could impart any advice or, opinion on this, I would say you have to really think of this phase as temporary and always have your goals in your mind. And really the focus is so important. Without focus, I don't think you can go from point A to point B. And again, challenges and adversity, in life, they're very temporary. I love the saying in Buddhism that, things are never permanent. You have to constantly evolve and things will evolve, but you have to always be very focused. And I think remaining focused, I would say, is the advice that I would give to other people, to get out of this phase and feel comfortable all over again.
So you're a woman leader, and I was wondering, what suggestion would you have for women leaders? I know that you also support a lot of women to become leaders. So my question is, what are your thoughts on one becoming a leader, or how can one, set up a good example within his or her community?
I would say, again, as a young woman who came here at such a young age, I did not have a mentor or somebody that kind of guided me. So I had to kind of navigate my path on my own. But 15 years later, if I can impart the same knowledge and help a young girl out in helping her navigate the path of PR, I would consider that I did something right, because especially for women moving from other countries, and wanting to go into this field like PR, publicity, there is no guidebook that tells you what to do. I did not have a guidebook, and I'm pretty sure there is no guidebook even today, on what you should do. You kind of have to figure it out on your own. So that's why mentoring is so satisfying to me, because I know the struggles that young women go through. If you're especially from a different country wanting to go into a new field, having that mentor, I think, helps you navigate the path easily. That's why I love working with women. That's why I love mentoring the younger generation of women, because at the end of the day, I'm also learning from them. And I think as a woman, we have to empower each other and learn from each other at the end of the day.
Talking about media, I'm curious to learn, can the social media impact leaders' leadership style?
I think social media does have a role to play when it comes to leadership. It can create a little bit of an impact. In social media, I think, everything is out there, right? And as a leader, I think social media does hold you accountable for your leadership. If you say one thing in person to someone and you go out there and do totally something else on social media, and I think you will be held accountable. A lot of leaders, I think, face that battle, sometimes because you want to put yourself out there, but you don't know the parameters or the boundaries. And I think, as social media is everywhere now, it can have a huge impact on your leadership. I think you have to be accountable for what you do offline and online. And sometimes social media does hold you accountable, I think, even for a leader.
And do you think that it can negatively impact the leader?
Absolutely. And I think social media, and again, it's one of those tools that you really have to, as a leader, you really have to know how to use it. sometimes social media, I think, humanizes a leader, especially if you're a CEO of a company, and especially if it's a big company. Your employees usually would not get a chance to interact with you on a day-to-day basis. But I think social media gives you that platform to help them see this leader as who this person is outside of the company. And I think that helps build the connection and emotional appeal, right? I think it's necessary for a leader to be on social media. But at the same time, if you're not using the social media for the right cause or the right message, I think it can negatively impact you. I think it's a matter of really making sure that you use the social media in a very balanced way without giving away too much, because you don't also want to give away too much, especially if you're part of a big company. You want to make sure you set those parameters, but you also don't want to not come off as a human being. At the end of the day, you are a human being leading a company.
Mm-hmm. I really like that you're talking about balance, importance of balance, how you communicate through social media. Any thoughts on leadership and power?
Power really means different things to different people. And I think in leadership, in my opinion, I think best use of power is to influence others and serve others. To me, that is the right use of power. Giving back is another important quality to have as a leader. And because you have that power and influence, I think you can give back to your community easily. And again, mentoring is another way you can use your power as a leader. And I think at the end of the day, as a leader, if you have the power, I think the power has to be utilized in a democratic manner. It has to be utilized in ways that benefit other people. And I think that's one of the huge benefits of being a leader and having the power and influence.
I really like how you're saying that once we are in a leadership position, we have to be sensitive and sensible how we lead. Is that true?
Yes, absolutely. And I think you took the words out of my mouth. Sensitive to other people's needs, and you have to be sensible in your decision making, because your decision making can have a huge impact, not just on one person, but on the entire company. So I think it is important to be both as a leader.
Mm-hmm. Do you believe that being assertive help you lead better?
Absolutely. I think being assertive is necessary in leadership. Sometimes you have to do things that may not always favor everyone, right? But you have to make that decision. And sometimes that's hard as a leader because, again, we are human beings. We have emotions. But you have to sometimes keep your emotions at the side and make a decision and be assertive. Mm-hmm. But assertiveness also, it's powerful when you combine assertiveness sometimes with empathy. And I think empathy is another really important quality to have as a leader. And I think with the assertiveness and empathy used in a balanced way, I think makes you a really effective leader.
So what you're saying to us, you have to have a balance between being assertive and having empathy so that you don't come off very strong in your requests.
Absolutely, because empathy helps you connect with the people. Assertiveness helps you make a decision. So I think you have to have both of these qualities in a leader.
So that leads me to my next question. Sometimes teams don't succeed in their assignments. Do you think that that's leaders' responsibility or that is on team?
Sometimes things don't turn out to be the way that we always want things to turn out, right? And I think that is the responsibility of the leader, I think, because, change is inevitable. And as a leader, you have to lead through a change in the company. And that is really difficult, but it's essential to do that, especially during crisis or change. You have to even lead more effectively and more efficiently. And it is your responsibility as a leader to make sure that everyone is on the same page, shares the same vision, and you have to be confident even through the hardships, and you have to engage your employees. You have to believe in yourself and let employees believe in you. So you have to lead with confidence, effectiveness, and efficiency even during a time of change.
Mm-hmm. So this leads me to my next question, which is, do you believe that communication and effective communication is a key to successful leadership?
Yes, communication It's one of the most important qualities in leadership because you have to keep the communication open with your team. Communication is a two-way street, right? You can't always expect your employees to communicate with you, but in return, you don't communicate with them. I think that's really important to have, that trait, and also not create a fear-based culture at your company. I think when you have open communication and open door policy, I think employees, they want to do a good job, especially if they know that the leader is pretty reasonable and communicates well. The vision is clear. At the end of the day, mistakes you can prevent them. And I think as a leader, communication is so important, even during crisis or even when there's no crisis. I think the communication line has to be open.
And I really like that you mentioned that you do not want to have a fear-based culture in your organization.
Yes.
Because I think that sets up a lot of people being afraid to ask questions and to possibly complete their jobs successfully.
Absolutely. Fear-based culture sometimes, I think, is more of a hindrance than anything. I think in a company, especially companies' productivity and efficiency, I think you've got to keep the communication channels open as a leader and really seek feedback from your employees. You always have to have the mindset of learning and asking for feedback.
Great. Any thoughts on generosity and leadership?
I look at generosity as a leader, again, in the form of giving back, I think, to my community. And you can do that in so many different ways. You can do that by volunteering on a cause that you're passionate about. Or if you're like me, who's in PR and branding, you can help a local small company, share your knowledge, because a lot of small companies sometimes don't have the resources or the budget for publicity or branding. And it's a really new concept sometimes for people, especially small businesses. And sharing your knowledge, I think, is another way you can give back. And sometimes just mentoring younger women, help them navigate the world of PR. To me, that is giving back. And to me, I look at those things as generosity, where you're kind of really opening up your time and your resources to help someone.
So what you're saying to us, generosity does not have to be just giving money. But it's more but it's more like giving your expertise, giving your time, advising people, and just making new generations better off.
Absolutely. It does not always equate to, I think, giving, writing a check. And that's fine. If somebody does that, I think that's great, but you can't just confine generosity to just one thing. Like you said, generosity can be so many different things.
And how do you stay humble while leading others?
That's a really good question, and something that I have to constantly remind myself as well. I think humility is a really beautiful thing. And sometimes, I think you have to constantly tell yourself that this is just a journey, that you're in this earth, this is a journey. Always remind yourself of your roots and your beginning, always your story. Think about your story, why you started the company, why are you a brand? What was that reason? Was it because you wanted to leave a legacy, or was it because you wanted to, help someone? I think if you remind yourself of your brand values, your story, at the end of the day, I think higher chance you're going to stay humble.
And how does clarity and curiosity impact leadership?
I think clarity and curiosity are really important to have as a leader, and it really impacts your leadership, I think, to a really larger degree, because you have to be clear in your vision as a leader, because when you are clear in your vision and in your objective, it's easier to impart that vision to somebody else. If you're not clear to begin with, it's harder to communicate that vision to someone and expecting somebody to understand it. And I think curiosity is another thing where you have to be curious as a leader. You have to learn. I think the learning curve for any entrepreneur or leader, I think, is very high, and you should never stop learning. And I think you can learn from anyone and everyone on a day-to-day basis. Don't confine yourself to just learning from people above you. Sometimes you can learn from people that are younger than you. They know so much about social media, the trends, and you can learn from them. Don't confine yourself to just learning from just one person or people like yourself. Always keep the demographics diverse when you want to learn from people.
Mm-hmm. And what is your mission in life?
My mission in life, it would have to be leaving, again, a legacy as a woman from Nepal, even though U.S. is my home now. I always tell myself that I came to this country at a time when Nepal was going through a civil conflict. And I came here for higher education, left my family behind. It wasn't an easy route, Again, I had to learn from my struggles. And if I were to do something right, I would say leaving a legacy, a footprint that my future self would be proud of. Mm-hmm. And to me, legacy is not something grand. It can be as simple as just making conscious decisions that you will be proud of one day.
Any final thoughts?
The only final thought I have is, be open to learning. And when you are open to learning as a leader, you can improve and be receptive to feedback. And if you make a mistake, I think we are human beings. Sometimes we are so hard on ourselves when we make mistakes. I think you have to make a mistake sometimes. Making mistake is also part of learning. And you have to take accountability as a leader and be held accountable when you make mistakes and learn. I think those are my only final thoughts.
And how can people get in contact with you?
People can get in contact with me by going to my website. It is www.meghahamal.com. So it is meghahamal.com, my first name and last name. And you can find my contact information on the website.
Perfect. Thank you, Megha, very much for being a guest on our show.
Thank you, Biana, for having me. Appreciate it.
Thank you for tuning in and listening to the Leadership with Biana Kovic Show. Remember that you're all leaders in your own rights, and the impact that you're meant to achieve starts with small acts of kindness, curiosity, and generosity. Please give us a like and subscribe to our channel. Thank you again, and until next time.